Hello everyone, welcome back to HP Gaming Garage. In this part, we'll continue learning more on the previous topic.
Now, you might start to be thinking at this point, game designers, they sound kind of like the nerve center of this operation, like the people in design are at the middle of everything on the project. And that's not entirely true, but yes, designers do touch a lot of parts of the game, and the lead designer on a project in particular is responsible for a lot when it comes to keeping the team on the same page and making sure everything and everyone is unified. So as I've said several times, the designer is the advocate for the player experience, but part of that is getting the team excited about the project. Because if everyone else on your team understands and shares the vision, then it's easier for people to work towards that goal. There's less chance of misunderstandings, and team morale will generally be high, which means less a chance of key people leaving during or immediately after the project, less chance of inter-team drama, creating frustrating and terrible moments during development. Statistically speaking, when it comes to the effect people have on the team and who makes the most difference between people coming out of a project saying, that was a great experience or that was a terrible experience, the person who has the most responsibility for how people experience game development, well, is not the designer, it's actually the producer. Producers have the biggest influence on whether people actually have a good time making a game, but lead designer would definitely be a strong number 2. So paying attention to how the entire team is fitting together, whether they're happy, whether they're excited to be working on this, is something designers want to pay close attention to if you want the best results. Now, there's a famous model of the stages that teams go through, credited to Bruce Tuckman, who wrote about this back in 1965. So this is not specific to games at all. It's true of all teams across all domains. And the model is called forming, storming, norming, performing. So in the forming stage, the team is just meeting for the first time. People are getting to know each other. You're all agreeing on project goals and who is going to do what tasks. Teammates are usually working in parallel here. Everyone is mostly independent. There's not a lot of people working together yet in pairs or small teams because that level of closeness and trust just hasn't developed and people just don't know each other's capabilities that well. So even if you wanted to collaborate with someone, you wouldn't necessarily know who. People are generally enthusiastic at this stage because the project is new, people haven't encountered the really hard problems yet, and people also tend to be on their best behavior because they want to make a good first impression so they can get along with the rest of the team. So when the team first forms, there aren't necessarily any ground rules or standards of behavior or clear boundaries, so people may start to test these to try things out. Most of the discussion within a team at this point is centered around just defining the project, its scope, and how you're going to approach it. Eventually, however, people are going to need to confront harder topics, which means the possibility of conflict, and that brings us to the next stage. So in the storming stage, the group is starting to build trust, but that comes with people feeling comfortable enough to state their opinions, and sometimes people are going to disagree on these opinions. That leads to additional questions like, when people disagree, who's in charge here anyway? Who's the final arbiter of decisions? Some people will tend to dominate discussions or back away from conflict because that's their personal style, and people's true colors tend to emerge. So this is where you really find out who tends to get really angry easily, who tends to dodge responsibility, who speaks really loudly and is more interested in getting people to say they're right than actually being right. Who are the peacemakers and compromisers and natural leaders? This is the stage where you may start to see interpersonal conflict between 2 or more members of the team, and where the first signs of tension and arguments happen. And this is why it's called the storming phase, because storms can happen that make being in the team unpleasant. Now, to be clear, this sounds bad, but it is not always a negative, and it's not always inevitable. Some teams during this stage are still congenial, they still work together to define clear boundaries, and are able to come to consensus and agree on standards so that no one gets hurt. Some teams are just really good at resolving their differences and respecting a diversity of opinions and making sure that everyone feels heard and understood, and also that if you can't come to unanimous agreements, that some people are going to be disappointed when things don't go their way, but this is okay. There are thousands of decisions to make. No one's going to win them all. The ideal case in this phase is everyone on the team learning tolerance with each other, figuring out each other's styles, and how to work together effectively without too much drama. And if there is some interpersonal drama, finding that out and working towards resolving those differences as early as possible so that as the designer, this is something you should be looking for and ready to step in and help others to overcome their differences. And if you're the one that someone has difficulty with, or you're having difficulty with someone else, that can be worth the extra time to work things out between them and get these grievances out in the open. And often this is as simple as someone just having ideas for the game that they want included and feeling like you as the designer keep telling them no and blocking their creative exercise. And really they just want to feel like they have some creative control, and just giving them a small part of the game to own is enough, or just assuring them that you do hear them, but you just can't implement their stuff right now because there isn't time in the schedule, or letting them know that you're going to try doing things a certain way first, but if that doesn't work, you will try their way. So they know you aren't marginalizing them or rejecting their ideas just because you don't like them. You have a job to do, and sometimes they can't have their way all the time. And sometimes you can also just sit down with them and explain design-wise why you can't use their ideas, but that can be time-consuming and also risky, because sometimes people will feel like you're criticizing them when you're taking down their ideas, and you don't want them feeling worthless either. Now, dysfunctional teams will stay in the storming phase forever and never grow out of it. Highly functional teams can get through this pretty quickly, so this can vary. At any rate, if you manage to get past the growing pains of a new team, you enter into a new phase, which in the Tuckman model is called norming. Now, in the norming phase, you've resolved disagreements, you've figured out the social norms of the group, and everyone is working effectively toward a common goal. People will take responsibility for the parts they own. Teammates tend to know better about who is good and at what, and who to go to with questions and requests. And people can start working together on tasks that cross boundaries or pass them back and forth as needed. The team at this point knows each other pretty well. Everyone is tolerant of each other. Everyone has a spirit of cooperation and is working toward a common goal. So your goal as a team at this point is to get through the forming and storming phases as quickly and painlessly as possible so you can get here. And at this point, the one danger to watch out for is people caring about the team so much that they focus on preventing conflict, where some individuals might keep quiet or not share ideas because they see the team as good and functional and they don't want to rock the boat. But this can hold the team back if people just don't share really cool ideas or don't address conflicts and just quietly hide from it. Now, at the highest level, the group is focused on common goals, and tasks pretty much get done without much intervention from management or leadership. And this frees up team leaders and managers to actually contribute more to the project themselves, getting their hands dirty if they don't have to use all their available time just managing the team. Even at this stage, people will still disagree and come into conflict with each other, but teammates have learned how to resolve disagreements in a socially positive way. And I should point out a couple things here. First is, this process takes time. You can't just force a new team directly into the later stages, just like you can't take a new romantic relationship into the kind that a couple would have after being happily married 30 years. A certain level of trust and intimacy and history has to be there, and that just takes time to build. The other thing to keep in mind is that teams can revert to earlier stages, especially if there's a change in team composition. Like, if one key person leaves and is replaced by someone else who's new, then the team overall may go back to the storming phase as this new person gets integrated to the team. So that is normal and natural and something to expect when your team changes. Last thing I feel I should talk about is the concept of team morale, which is basically how do teammates feel about being on the team and how do they feel about the project. Ideally, you have a team where everyone is excited about the project, everyone's feeling good about the team, and that enthusiasm is infectious and just multiplies and keeps people going and just keeps everyone invested. But sometimes you don't have that situation. Sometimes instead, one or more people are convinced the project will fail, they're just not putting in the effort, or they're constantly getting into fights with other teammates, and that can also be infectious, but in a bad way. If you do a web search for team morale, you'll find endless articles on business websites giving you tips for how managers can keep morale high. Some of that advice can be useful, some is obvious, some is useful in a corporate context, but not for student or private projects. For example, just giving everyone enough time off work to maintain good work-life balance is a common tip, and a very important one. But if you're making a game as a student, as part of a class, you don't really have any control over anyone's work hours, so that isn't really that useful unless you're a manager at a game company and you have the power to set work hours. But there are a few morale killers that you'll want to be careful of no matter what your team size and context. One of the most common mistakes I see made on a student development teams in particular, or small or new development teams, is taking on too much. An inexperienced team that wants to make a AAA game, like the kinds of big budget games that you might normally play, that's unrealistic. Right? AAA games are often made with teams of hundreds of people working over 40 hours per week for 2 to 5 years or more. If you've got 10 people on your team working 10 hours per week part-time, even if you're just as efficient as a large team of experienced professionals, Math-wise, it'd take you 80 years or more just to match the total number of hours that a 100-person full-time team could do. By the time the team realizes they're in over their head, they've already sunk a ton of time and effort into a project that's just too big to ever get done. And when you realize you put a bunch of your blood and tears and soul into a game that will just never be finished, that is absolutely heartbreaking. And once people figure that out, the entire project collapses under its own weight, and everyone's left with an unfinished game that they can't really show anywhere, and it just feels awful. So the best thing you could do at every point is just keep an eye on what is it going to take to get this game done in a releasable state? How close are we? And are we getting closer or further away over time? Now, you might think, well, tracking timelines is more of a producer's job than a designer's. Yes, but as the designer who is creating work for the team, you are the one who's in the best position to manage scope by deciding what has to get done and what doesn't and in what order. So you can be thinking about, okay, what if you had to cut 90% of the features in the game? What's the 10% of what you design that's the most important? And then have the team work on that core experience first. And then you can actually have something playable reasonably quickly and can playtest it internally within a team, and you can make sure the game is working. And that also puts the game in a state where it's constantly releasable. At any given time, you could say, okay, we have a running, functional game. If we absolutely had to, we could release it now. There are more features we'd like to add, but what we have now can at least be played front to end. That's a good situation to be in. It can also help keep morale high if everyone can actually play the game periodically so they know they're working on something real, and especially if people like the game they're building. So regular internal builds and playtests can do wonders for communicating with the team so that everyone understands what you're building and what's cool about it, in addition to helping morale. Another thing to be careful about are team meetings. Meetings are something that are pretty common in teams. A lot of times they're necessary as people need to touch base with each other to give or receive information about the project they might not be able to get otherwise. But meetings can also be a huge source of stress for some people and a huge waste of time if done poorly. There is an art to running successful meetings. First, keep in mind that a meeting can be a massive time sink, more than you think. Like, say you have a 10-person team and you have an hour-long all-team meeting once per week. That means 10 person hours every week are spent just on that one meeting. Now think about what you could do in 10 hours. In 10 hours, you could have a new feature implemented in your game. I've worked with people in game jams who could get an entire game up and running in 10 hours if you leave them alone. So 10 people, 1 hour a week, that can suck a huge amount of time away from the project itself, which means that just about every meeting really needs to fight hard to justify itself. Don't just fill time because you have it on a calendar. If you've got a 1 hour meeting scheduled, but you get through your meeting agenda in 15 minutes, let everyone go. Give them back the time. Give them back the rest of the hour for their own use. They've got things to do. On that subject, every meeting should have an agenda, and it should involve only items where it's important for everyone invited to the meeting to be there and participate in real time. So for example, a meeting can be a great way to solve a technical issue if you get the right people in the room to work it out, where none of them could do this individually and they all have something to contribute to the problem solution. But meetings aren't a great way of just giving the team, say, a global announcement. That's something you could do just as easily over the team's Discord or Slack or email or whatever team communication channels you have set up. Also keep in mind, some people are shy and hesitant to present their work in front of a group. And if you're holding stand-up meetings where everyone just goes around saying what they're working on, which is a common thing and can be good, but you do want to recognize that if you're doing that, that can cause a lot of anxiety in some people, to the point that they won't really be listening to what anyone else is saying because they'll be so focused on just making sure that they say their own things properly. Meanwhile, other people love to do this. They love to brag about all the cool stuff they've done, but that can be a bit off-putting to other people who just really don't need to hear it. Now, sometimes a morale problem in a team is actually a problem with one single person. Some people are just naturally bullies, or they're overly negative, or they're destructively critical instead of constructively critical in ways that can just ruin everyone else's day. And sometimes this is a case where the person isn't being malicious, they just haven't figured out the group norms yet, and you just need to take them aside to explain what their expected behavior is and the effect their behavior is having on other people and what effect that will have back on them, and give them the opportunity to change. This happens a lot, for example, with neurodivergent teammates, such as people with autism, ADHD, OCD, depression, or bipolar. Those are all super common in games. But in some of these cases, the person has learned some behaviors that are fine for them. They're fine for people who know them well, but it may be misinterpreted by a neurotypical person as something that sounds more malicious or manipulative than it really is. And once they know clearly what's expected of their behavior and you can give them constructive ways to express themselves, things get much better and everything clears up and it's fine. Now, of course, there are some people who are malicious and destructive, and you'll see that pretty quickly when you talk to them about their behaviors, because they will tend to get defensive, aggressive, threatening, or just refuse to change. And at that point, you're dealing with a toxic person. And generally, the best solution is to get them off the team, since no matter how good a coder or artist or whatever a person is, it generally can't make up for the harm they can cause in lower morale, lower productivity, and lower quality of life for the entire rest of the team. So let them go and make their own game and leave the rest of your team alone. And if that's not an option, for example, maybe you're stuck with your team in a class and the professor won't allow you to switch teams or to fire people from your team, even when that would otherwise be a possibility, then at least you can make sure the teacher knows what's going on so they can intervene, or at least not hold one teammate's actions against the rest of the team. And lastly, so many morale issues are really just poor communication, so establish how to communicate as one of the first things you do as a team. For example, suppose you have a team where there's no clear standards on how to communicate or what to communicate or who to communicate with, and you have a teammate who turns out they've ghosted everyone or they just aren't doing their assigned work. Now, you might naturally think, oh, wow, that person's lazy, they're undependable, they don't care about the project. And that might be the case, but it could also just as easily be that they're having some very serious personal issues, like they're dealing with a death in the family, or dealing with clinical depression, or some other struggle that's just making it hard for them to do work and hard to communicate. And after being gone for a few days, they're just so embarrassed that they dropped the ball that it makes it progressively harder for them to just pick it up and rejoin the team. So they just stay silent in the corner out of fear of rejection. Or another common thing I see is someone who is feeling big-time imposter syndrome. They feel like everyone else on the team is more skilled and experienced than them, and they're feeling afraid that they just aren't as good as the rest of the team. They're the weak link. If they touch anything, they're going to break it. So they keep their hands off the project. Not because they're lazy, not because they don't care, rather because they do care a great deal about the project and they're afraid that they'll only make it worse if they touch it. That's a very different situation. Or maybe the team is all on Discord, but one person was accidentally left off the server invite, so they never join. And now they're thinking that the team has ghosted them because no one ever talks to them, and everyone else on the team Discord is thinking they've ghosted the team because they're not on the Discord and not responding. Basically, just decide what tools you all plan to use to communicate, make it clear who to go to when things aren't going well, and find alternate ways to reach each other in case of emergency. Like if you're only using Discord or Slack and someone's internet goes down, is there some alternate way to reach out to them to make sure they're okay? So it's usually worth making sure everyone includes at least 2 methods of contact for themselves, just in case. So if I haven't mentioned it before, the best way to get experience with anything involved with games is to jump in and make them. I can lecture you for 100 hours on game design theory, but at the end of the day, you get good at game design by designing games. So go make them. And this is true with team skills as well. A great way to get this kind of practice is with events called game jams. These are events where you make a complete game, sometimes individually, but usually in a team, and usually over a short period of time, such as a single weekend. Some jams require you to sign up solo or with a pre-formed team, but many of them will allow you to form teams at the start of the jam so you can get paired up with other people. And that's great if you're isolated or you don't know any other local developers to work with, or if you just want to meet new people who could become great future collaborators. Some game jams are in person, so you'd have to be in the right area, but most game jams these days are either fully remote or at least have a remote option. Now, I'm not saying you should be participating in game jams continually. That'd be a great way to burn yourself out. But if you haven't done a game jam before, try it out at least once, and then try again in a few months, and eventually work yourself up to doing 1 jam per month. Now, itch.io has a wonderful site linked here that keeps track of most game jams going on at any given time. And if you go there, you'll see there are dozens, sometimes hundreds of game jams going on right now at any given time with all kinds of different themes and focuses. So it should be super easy to find one that fits your schedule and fits the kind of activity you like to practice.
But before you do that, go ahead and take the assessment so you can get your certification from HP Gaming Garage. Then join me next time for the final module, where you can complete this course and we'll be talking about what comes next. what kinds of careers exist in game design, and how to get them.